This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Tesla Boulevard. Oh, great. I guess they named a street after the new car dealership. That seems like a thing that would happen nowadays, but wait a minute. Marconi Boulevard, Watt Street, Faraday Street, Edison Street. These aren't named after cars. They're named after scientists. Physicists mostly, and mostly physicists who contributed to our understanding of electricity. Makes total sense because this is the lovely little town of Alcoa, Tennessee, where aluminum comes from, at least a whole lot of it. And if there's one thing you need a lot of to make aluminum, it's electricity. To make a pan or a roll of foil or whatever, first you mine bauxite in Australia or China or Brazil or some such, and then use a whole bunch of heat and pressure to extract the aluminum oxide. Aluminum oxidizes in a flash. That's what that sort of gray film is that's on any aluminum baking sheets that you might have. There you go, that's the oxide right there. Anyway, you dissolve the oxide in molten cryolite and then you electrocute it. Well, technically it's electrolysis. An incredibly powerful electrical current splits the aluminum from the oxygen, and pure molten aluminum collects at the bottom of your pot. And then you can use it to make a pot or a pan like this. I mean, this is stainless steel clad to prevent the buildup of that oxide layer, among other reasons. But on the core, on the inside, there's layers of aluminum because aluminum offers this unparalleled combination of low density and high thermal conductivity. It's very light, but gets really hot and gets hot fast. This video is not sponsored by Big Aluminum, by the way. In fact, I think I'm going to say some things that Big Aluminum would rather I not say, but I do like aluminum as a cooking material for sure. And I like this town, a town aluminum built. If we're going to name streets after war heroes and sports heroes, well, we should name some of them after science heroes too. Alessandro Volta, Italian who discovered methane and helped to invent the battery. Voltage is named after him. Georg Ohm, German who did battery work based on Volta and figured out the unit of electrical resistance that we call ohms. Anyway, between the incredible amount of heat required and the electrolysis step, you just need a huge amount of electricity to make aluminum, and that explains why the Pittsburgh-based Aluminum Company of America decided to look down here in East Tennessee for a place to build their next factory. Happened in the early 20th century. The US government had long observed the potential for hydroelectric power here in the Great Smoky Mountains that split Tennessee from North Carolina, a terrific choke point for building up water pressure. At the same time, the valleys around the Tennessee River and its tributaries were among the most economically destitute places in this country. Rocky, depleted soils prone to catastrophic flooding. No doubt that narrative was played up a bit by government and corporate interests who wanted to justify displacing entire communities with a series of huge dams. But they weren't lying either. This incredibly tall dam was built by the Tennessee Valley Authority, a crowning achievement of the New Deal era of public investment in the United States. Despite its not great environmental record and such, the TVA remains a model of what a government-owned utility can do for the people. Anyway, the Alcoa company looked at where you could build the hydroelectric dams, and then they looked at the nearest rail hub, and they built their new factory there. And now we call this place Alcoa, Tennessee. It's about 15 miles south of Knoxville, and when the company first came here, there really wasn't much developed. They had to build a company town almost from scratch to house the workers and such. And so it was engineers from Alcoa who actually laid out the town and named the streets. And who do you name streets after? You name them after your heroes. Who's a hero to an engineer? Michael Faraday, Englishman who figured out like half of the basic principles underlying all of modern electrical systems, including electrolysis. Charles Darwin, bold move, naming a street in the religious conservative South after the evolution guy. Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, English anatomist who defended Darwin's theory. The city fathers, and yes, they were all men, they had kind of a corporate utopian vision for this community. They built it all around this giant central park, Springbrook Park. The plant managers built their palatial homes right next to the more modest houses for the workers. And of course, by that I mean they're white workers. Black workers had to live literally on the other side of the tracks in neighborhoods that I will say are still quite lovely. Decent, affordable housing for working people. Crazy idea, right? Anyway, the company built ponds and pools and schools, all segregated at first. We must not lose sight of that. But today, these are honestly some of the most integrated public spaces you're going to see around Knoxville. Okay, who we got here? Oh, Thomas Newcomen invented the Newcomen steam engine. James Watt improved the steam engine, and the unit of power watt is named after him. A lot of the streets were named by Alcoa's engineer in charge of construction down here. His name was Victor Holtquist, and that's his house over there. Or it was, anyway, a long time ago. He was simultaneously an Alcoa corporate bigwig and the city manager of Alcoa, the municipality. Predictably, this resulted in him in the 1930s calling the city police to come in and help to violently break up strikes that were organized by workers who were just trying to unionize. Don't love that. But I do love these streets. Samuel Morse, American who helped invent the telegraph and Morse code. He was also an important painter. Alexander Graham Bell basically invented the telephone. Nikola Tesla, Serbian-American inventor of AC power and arguably also kind of the telephone and a whole bunch of other stuff. Thomas Edison, American inventor of like almost everything else and who arguably screwed Tesla over. During the Great Depression, demand for aluminum, of course, just kind of collapsed, and the city was afraid that if they stopped making aluminum, all the workers would move away and try to find jobs elsewhere, so they just kept making aluminum and stockpiling it, albeit employing people at fewer hours, but they kept people employed, and when World War II happened, all of that surplus aluminum just flew right off the shelves, kind of literally, because it went into aircraft, right? Super lightweight. Who we got here? Alfred Nobel invented dynamite and then felt so bad about it that he endowed the Nobel Prize. That old story about his motives is disputed by historians, by the way. Also probably a myth that Isaac Newton got hit with an apple to discover gravity, though describe it mathematically he did. Marconi! He played the mamba! Nah, he didn't play the mamba. The mamba is not a thing that you play, it's a snake. They probably meant mambo in that song. But anyway, a lot of those streets like Marconi, they're actually newer streets that have been named in the tradition of the older streets, and I quite like that. I do wish they would name some after some scientists who aren't white men, but, you know. Yeah. James Prescott Joule, one of the guys who came up with the first law of thermodynamics. The energy unit of the joule is named after him. William Thomson, the first Baron Kelvin, first guy to write down the second law of thermodynamics. The Kelvin temperature scale is named after him. Now here's one that might be food related. I can't verify it, but I think this one must be named after Ira Remsen, American chemist who discovered saccharin, the first artificial sweetener. He had been researching coal tar derivatives all day, and then he went home, had dinner with his wife, said, "Pass the rolls, dear." He ate the rolls, and they seemed kind of weirdly sweet to him, and then they had this strange bitter aftertaste. And he said, "Hey, honey, taste this." And she was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so he licked his fingers, and oh yeah, saccharin. He'd accidentally invented or discovered saccharin derived from coal tar. Something that kind of burns my dinner roll is that this locally iconic compression tower at the plant, this no longer says Alcoa on it like it used to. Now it says Arconic. For stonks reasons, a few years ago, Alcoa spun off some of its businesses into another company called Arconic. Arconic got this plant in the divorce, and so they changed the big sign, even though the town is still called Alcoa. I think they should have left the sign alone as like a living historical marker, kind of like the street signs are. George Stephenson, the father of railways, set the standard railway gauge used to this day almost everywhere except Russia. That's why the Russians can't just roll their trains right into Europe. It's not the same width of track. That's become relevant of late. Sir Henry Bessemer invented the Bessemer process for making steel, and Elias Howe invented the sewing machine, arguably. Check this out. William Gilbert was an Elizabethan guy who figured out that the Earth is a giant magnet. Almost 500 years ago he figured that out. And above him there is Sir William Henry Perkins, who was knighted for discovering the color mauve. Great work if you can get it. I mean, I've got great work if you can get it. I get on the internet and talk about whatever thing I see in the world that makes me curious, and Squarespace pays me for that. You can save 10% off a website or domain name registration right now with my code Ragusia. If anyone's ever going to name a street after me, I need to manage my public image a little bit better, need a new website where I get to present myself and my work the way that I want to. I'm honestly kind of suspicious of businesses that only have a presence on like social media, especially now that social media is more fragmented than ever. I think you got to hang a shingle online that is your shingle, and it's never been easier to build a Squarespace site. I've done this in literally minutes. Drag and drop tools, AI assist if you want it, free trial, no credit card required to start building a site, but when you're ready to take it live or to register a domain name, use my code Ragusia to save 10%. Thank you, Squarespace. And thank you, aluminum, thank you, hydroelectric power, and hey, thank you, science. Name everything after science.